Good afternoon and welcome to part 3 of our Crowdfund Birmingham series. Today we're talking about connecting with your crowd and securing the support that you need to make your idea happen. My name's Sammy Morger. I'm broadcasting today live from Crowdfunder HQ down in Cornwall. So we're pretty much going to kick straight off this afternoon. So a little bit of a recap first of all. For those of you that joined the very first session, you remember we spoke a lot about planning your project. So giving you a really solid foundation on which to build the other elements of your project. If you did miss this session, you can actually find it and watch it back on YouTube and also on the Eventbrite link that you signed up to initially for Crowdfund Birmingham. Next, we spoke about creating your project. So all of those key elements on actually making the perfect project page. So telling your story, coming up with great rewards that are really relevant and motivating for your audience, and also setting a really realistic and achievable target. Again, you can watch this back on YouTube and those links are there on the Eventbrite for you as well if you did miss that one. So today, more specifically, we're going to be focusing on the final stage, on running your project. So that's everything from getting off to a really strong start with a really solid launch plan, sharing your project and connecting with your crowd. It's worth me mentioning at this stage that we do have a guide specifically for Crowdfund Birmingham, which you can download and read, and there's one for each of these 3 steps. The final one on running your project is linked to down below this video on YouTube, and you can also find it on that Eventbrite link. Please do make sure that you download that and have a read through it. It's honestly the most useful tool that there is in terms of giving your project and the best chance possible of being as successful as it can be. So we're going to start off by looking at some of the fundamentals of communicating and promoting, spreading the word about your crowdfunding project. Now, there's a couple of things on this slide that people here in the office are used to hearing me say all the time, because they really are very central to what makes a strong plan for communicating your project. First of all, start from the middle and work your way out. Now, what we're talking about here specifically is talking about your crowd when we talk about the middle. So if you remember back in that very first session when we looked at planning and we drew a network map, we're talking about those people very closest to you, to the project and to your organisation, people who perhaps are personally familiar with you, maybe they've worked with you before, or they're aware of what you're already doing. So those are the people that I would call kind of in the inner circle, your core crowd, and people that perhaps haven't heard of you or met you or don't know anything about your organisation would be in kind of the wider, the edges, if you think back to that kind of diagram that we did. So very much starting with those people who you know best, and slowly working your way out. The temptation for a lot of people when they launch a crowdfunding project is they panic and think they have to tell everyone in the world on day one, whereas it definitely works better is you shift up slowly through the gears. Now, one major reason for that is as your project gains some momentum and it starts to get more and more support, it starts to look more credible and actually a lot more attractive for people who are less familiar with you to get involved and start supporting it. So that's very much the reason for taking your time and working your way out to those outer circles. So the other key element, of course, is be personal and be direct. It sounds a little bit like common sense, and I guess in many ways it is. The more personal and direct you can be with your communication, the better chance it is that people will actually respond to that. They'll actually engage with it and be inspired, hopefully, to actually make that pledge, which is what we're looking for. So, for example, if you can send someone a direct one-to-one email, or even a Facebook message, or even if you could pick up the phone to them, you'll find that that will be much more effective in getting a response then perhaps including someone on a bulk email list or sending them a message as part of a group. Because they feel like they're being spoken to personally and there's actually a conversation, it's much, much better. So do be as direct and personal as you can be. It does, of course, take a little bit more time, but it's absolutely worth it. So moving on to getting launch ready. First thing, once you're ready to go, you've got your plan done, you've created your project page, is actually pinning down a date for you to launch your crowdfund. Try and stick to that once you've pinned one down. And of course, do take into account any other factors that you should consider kind of on your calendar. So perhaps if there's an event that you've got on, or perhaps if there's something happening wider kind of on the calendar, so if there's a bank holiday or perhaps on voting day, something like that, you might want to be mindful of those dates and make sure that you plan your launch around that. So once you've pinned that down, what you want to do is make sure that all of those people are in that inner circle, in that core crowd that we spoke about a minute ago, that they all know about that date. So you might want to set up a Facebook event, for example, for it and invite everyone along. Of course, not only will they get that notification then, but Facebook, really nicely for us, actually reminds people just before the event, so they'll be getting that reminder too. You might want to send out a little card or perhaps just a little e-card and pop it into people's calendars. However you want to do it, just make sure that people are aware of it. Next up, make sure that you've got some images ready to go. Now, this is because images are very much at the core of what makes a great message. So whether that's through a Facebook post, through a press release, or even on an email, you want to make sure that you've got some bright, bold, unique, really eye-catching and strong images that you can use. And we want to have more than just one or two of them. We want to have a few different things that you can put out over the course of the few weeks that you're going to be live, so you've got lots of fresh content to keep people engaged and interested in what you're doing. So have a look at what you've got. If you're thinking, actually, I'm a little bit short on images, it's a really good idea to try and build some of those up before you launch, when you've got a little bit more time. And do review that plan that we made back in that very first session. Check that you've got everything ticked off, and check that you're happy with what's happening when and who's responsible for doing what. Really, really key just before going live. So once you've launched, of course, the next thing you need to do is try and get at least 10 pledges. It's a little bit of an arbitrary number, but it's a really good target for you to aim for, particularly in those first 24 hours. Worth me mentioning that you need to have at least one pledge on your crowdfunder project in order for it to show up on the website in searches and on campaign pages. So do make sure you've got some people poised and ready to press that pledge button as soon as it goes live. Next thing to do, of course, is to pick up the phone and remind people, remember I said I was launching that crowdfund project? Yep, great, well, it's live now. So just a sort of gentle nudge again to those people in your inner network to try and build up a bit of momentum on the first couple of days. And finally, something which is actually quite a nice thing to do for yourselves and for your team is to have a little bit of a get together. And we don't necessarily mean anything overly formal or organised here. It can literally just be a bit of a gathering at the pub or at someone's house, down at the park, just to kind of raise a glass and celebrate the fact that you're live, kind of to cement that sense of working as a team and being very excited and enthused about the road ahead. Of course, if you can invite a few other people along as well, it's a great way of securing some early pledges too and getting them just as excited about the project. So hopefully some of you will recognise this page from the Crowdfund Birmingham pack, part 3 on running your project. So it's a really good starting point for you to start building your communication plan, particularly if it's not something that you're particularly familiar with or you've not got a lot of experience in. Definitely use this checklist to get you started. It gives you all kind of the different basics in terms of the channels, and you can start to think about the number of people you might be able to reach via each of those and start to build a little bit of a plan as to what you can use it for. Some people like to just use that sheet. You might want to sort of repurpose it and make it as a bit of a list, or maybe even create an Excel spreadsheet. If you're like me, you actually prefer just to print off a paper calendar. I'm a bit old school. I like to kind of have pen and paper here, so I can start to map on the different days when things are going to happen. So I know that I've got at least one thing planned for each and every day. And ideally, of course, we want to be making sure that you're hitting a different audience on each day and really mixing it up. And perhaps even as well using kind of a different channel or different medium. So for example, you might be sending some personal emails on one day, put out a press release on another day, perhaps you'll attend an event on the next day and then put up some posters the day after. So keep mixing it up. Next, once you've happy that you've engaged with that, with those initial kind of core backers, we're ready to start making sure that we can connect with everyone on that network map. If you could limit and only do 3 things, these would be the 3 things that will really make the difference. So round about 70 to 80% of all pledges across Crowdfunder come from these 3 sources. So this is really where you should be focusing your time and your energy. Email is really, really key because, of course, it allows you to do that direct and personal communication. And don't just settle for dropping people one email and hoping that they'll act on it. You do need to, of course, follow it up and check back on if people have pledged, if not, why not, and hopefully you can kind of make the most that you can from that. Worth me mentioning again that in the Crowdfund Birmingham packs, in that 3rd pack, there's actually a whole page on each one of these different tactics, if you like. So there's loads of advice on how to use emails, what to include, when to send them, all of that kind of thing. So do refer back to that. Next up, of course, social media. Now, Facebook in particular is really, really key here. Round about 30 to 40% of pledges come from Facebook for the vast majority of projects. It's a really, really big driver. Of course, there's so many different things you can use Facebook for. You can post on your own timeline, you can message people directly, you can set up events, you can do a live broadcast just like this one. So that's why it's particularly useful, because there's so many different ways you can use it. Twitter as well is pretty good at raising awareness, so it's a nice way of kind of connecting with people outside of that immediate crowd, but it doesn't necessarily convert as well in terms of actual money in the bank. If perhaps you have a really strong Instagram following, or you think that LinkedIn is particularly relevant for your project, do of course feel free to use those to push people to your crowdfund. Something which is really useful on LinkedIn is that you can actually do a download and get the email addresses of everyone that you're connected to on LinkedIn. And you can then of course use that to message them directly outside of the platform. And finally, do make sure that you've got something on your website throughout the duration of your crowdfund that points people to the crowdfunder page directly. So we want it to be right up there at the top. So any traffic that comes through to your website is finding out about the fact that you're crowdfunding. You can even embed our actual widget that you can find on your live dashboard down the right-hand side that actually takes people straight through to the pledge button. If you do normally have any other donate buttons on your website, it's also a good idea to make sure that they're disabled just while you're crowdfunding. So as we come into week 2, you might want to look at widening your crowd, so reaching people outside of your own network. Now, there's so many different things that you can do to try and reach those people. We've just put down a few here. Again, there's lots more advice in that pack. It might be that actually doing a press release and speaking to your local press could be a really good idea. Maybe even getting on the radio, putting up some posters or giving out flyers, maybe even reaching out to bloggers if that's really relevant to what you're doing, or attending events. You do, of course, want to make sure that you're using project updates. If you're not familiar with how project updates works, it's something that you can do once your project is live, and it actually sends that message directly to everyone who's backed your project so far, as well as appearing publicly on your project page on the updates tab. So it's a really great way of making sure that all of your supporters feel like they're valued, feel like they're a part of the crowd, part of the team, and very much driving things forward. Do make sure as the project progresses over the weeks that you are keeping a close eye on your dashboard. There's so much information on there which is really, really useful in letting you know how things are going. On Crowdfunder, you actually have access to some really great insight with things like where your pledges are coming from, whether that's Facebook or email or from a different website or from a news piece. It also tells you about how many people are looking at your page and how many of those people are actually going on to make a pledge. So do keep a close eye on that. It's absolutely there to help you to make smart decisions on where your time and your energy is best placed. So hopefully if you've made it through the pack and you've made it to the end, you're ready to go live. It can of course be totally nerve-wracking, but also very, very exciting. Don't forget that you can also apply for extra funding from Birmingham City Council. You can do that at crowdfunder.co.uk/Birmingham. And on there you can see the criteria for what kind of projects might be eligible for the funding, and you can also fill out an application form. If you do need any help at all in the meantime, you can get in touch with me directly on Twitter for anything short and quick. My Twitter handle is @SammyMorja. You should be able to see it there on the screen. Or you can shoot us an email over, and that's support@crowdfunder.co.uk. Our next session is going to be on Wednesday, the 3rd of May, and that's going to be at 4 p.m. That session is actually going to be a Q&A sort of surgery drop-in style. So if you have any questions at all, you can actually get them answered really quickly, right sort of here and now. We'll be able to give you answers. And that's anything to do with your project specifically, to do with crowdfunding or crowdfunder, or about the Birmingham campaign. So hopefully you found this session useful and have a better idea of how to launch your project with a bang. Don't forget that, of course, you can watch back any of this content again on YouTube if there's anything you'd like to go over again. And of course, please do send this on to anyone else that you think would find it useful. Thanks so much. I'll see you next time.